We're headed toward an exciting, all-renewable energy future. Wind and solar will power the world of tomorrow. And tomorrow isn't far off. It's time to wake up. You're having a dream. Here's the reality. Oil, natural gas, and coal provide 84% of all the world's energy. That's down just 2 percentage points from 20 years ago. And oil still powers nearly 97% of all global transportation. Contrary to headlines claiming that we're rapidly transitioning away from fossil fuels, it's just not happening. 2 decades and $5 trillion of governments investing in green energy, and we've barely moved the needle. This was supposed to be easy. Why is it so hard? In a word, rocks. To get the same amount of energy from solar and wind that we now get from fossil fuels, we're going to have to massively increase mining by more than 1,000%. This isn't speculation, this is physics. Copper, iron ore, silicon, nickel, chromium, zinc, cobalt, lithium, graphite, and rare earth metals like neodymium. We need them all. And then those metals and materials have to be turned into motors, turbine blades, solar panels, batteries, and hundreds of other industrial components. That also takes lots of energy, which requires even more mining. As the World Bank study put it, these green technologies are in fact significantly more material intensive than our current energy mix. That may be the understatement of the century. Raw materials account for 50 to 70% of the costs to manufacture both solar panels and batteries. Until now, it hasn't really mattered that much because wind and solar still account for only a few percentage points of the global energy supply. They're an applause line for environmentalists, not a major energy player, and it's unlikely they will be in the foreseeable future. But for the sake of argument, let's say we sharply ramp up mining. Where would these new mines be located? Well, for one, China. That country is today the single largest source of most of our critical energy materials. The United States is not only a minor player, but is dependent on imports for 100% of 17 critical minerals. Do we want to give China more political and economic leverage? Europe has made itself dependent on Russia for 40% of its natural gas. How well has that worked out? Ironically, we have all the minerals we need right here in North America. But good luck trying to get them out of the ground. Proposals to build mines in the United States and increasingly almost everywhere else meet fierce opposition, if not outright bans. To give just one example, in 2022, the Biden administration canceled a proposed copper and nickel mine in northern Minnesota. This was after years of delays navigating a maze of environmental regulations. And yes, the same environmentalists and green-leaning politicians who tout all the benefits of electric cars are the same people who make mining the materials essential to build those cars, like copper and nickel, all but impossible. Try to square that circle. So far, we've only talked about today's energy needs. What about tomorrow's? Future energy demand will be far greater than today's. That's been true for the entire history of civilization. The future will not only have more people, but also more innovations. And entrepreneurs have always been better at inventing new ways to use energy than to produce it. It's obvious but worth stating, before the invention of automobiles, airplanes, pharmaceuticals, or computers, there was no energy needed to power them. And as more people become more prosperous, they will want the things others already have, from better medical care to vacations to cars. In America, there are about 80 cars for every 100 citizens. In most of the world, it's about 5 per 100 citizens. Over 80% of air travel is for personal purposes, so that's 2 billion barrels of oil a year. Hospitals use 250% more energy per square foot than an average commercial building. And the global information infrastructure, the cloud, already uses twice as much electricity as the entire country of Japan, the world's third largest economy. The massive data centers at the heart of the cloud alone consume almost 10 times more electricity than the world's 10 million electric cars. E-commerce has taken off and is propelling record growth in warehouses, increasingly filled with energy-hungry robots. America's truck freight index more than doubled in the past decade to deliver the goods to and from those warehouses. These are today's known trends. While we can't predict the future, we can predict there'll be more innovation in robotics, drones, quantum computing, biotechnology, and new industries not yet imagined. All of it will require more energy, a lot more. Fossil fuels, nuclear energy, and yes, renewables will be required. But if you think we could get it all from wind and solar, dream on. I'm Mark Mills, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Prager University.
This is lithium. Pretty soon, we're going to need a lot of it. Lithium is a useful metal. It spends its entire existence trying to get rid of its one outer electron, but crucially, this reaction can be both controlled and reversed. That means, properly configured, the metal can discharge energy when needed, take in more energy, and then discharge that energy. Essentially, it can act as a battery. It's only been a few decades since lithium-ion batteries reached commercial feasibility, but in that time, they have become the power source of choice for portable electronics thanks to their perfect blend of safety and lightness. However, the latest major tech boom, the latest infatuation of Silicon Valley and Wall Street alike, is centered around the largest consumer electronics product to date: electric vehicles. And pretty soon, we're going to need a lot of them. The UK, for example, has committed to banning internal combustion car sales by 2030. To replace its 31.5 million vehicles, about 236,000 metric tons of lithium carbonate are needed. To produce 236,000 metric tons of lithium carbonate, every lithium mine in the world would have to devote its output to this one use for 9 months. And there are a whole lot more countries, a whole lot more lithium applications, and a whole lot more growth in the forecast. While the industry and its issues may be complex, the way in which battery-grade lithium is produced is not. 4 countries dominate the industry. Argentina, Chile, Australia, and China combined account for 92% of the globe's production. The metal is extracted from the ground at massive sites like the Greenbushes mine in Western Australia, which is the world's largest hard rock lithium mine. The site was selected due to the abundance of spodumene in the area, which is a mineral that contains large concentrations of lithium. Once the raw material is extracted from the ground, is transported 2.5 hours north to the Kwinana lithium plant near Perth, a facility majority owned and operated by a Chinese company, Tianqi Lithium, which is responsible for almost half of the world's production of the metal. Once refined, lithium hydroxide and other compounds are sold to battery manufacturers, which in about 3/4 of the cases means one of 3 companies: LG Chem, CATL, or Panasonic. The problem, however, is the world's solution. In addition to the UK, Iceland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Israel, Singapore, and South Korea have each committed to banning the sale of internal combustion passenger vehicles within the next decade. Adding up their annual passenger vehicle sales numbers from 2019, that means the absolute base case demand for EVs a decade from now will be 9.5 million per year. Just to reach that, EV production would have to quintuple, but even the most conservative forecasters don't dare tread anywhere close to a number as low as 9.5 million in 2032. The market is waking up to what this means for lithium demand. Across 2021, seaborne lithium prices rose from around $8,000 per metric ton to over $30,000, a 400% rise in a mere 12 months, and lithium is hardly the only crucial metal for lithium-ion battery production. It's just the one in the name. Cobalt and nickel are also critical to most commercially available versions of these batteries, and the situation is hardly different with them. Cobalt prices doubled across 2021, while nickel rose to its highest price in a decade. So the world needs a lot more metals, but right now, it's hard to believe the world's going to get them. The biggest hurdle the industry faces is exemplified here: Thacker Pass, Nevada. Thacker Pass is located in one of the most sparsely populated areas of the country. It's a half-hour's drive to the nearest store, an hour to the nearest supermarket, and 3 to the nearest Starbucks. The few roads that exist in the area are lucky to see a few cars an hour traveling to and from the various remote farms, ranches, and communities dotting northern Nevada. That could soon change, though. 250 miles or 400 kilometers to the south is the Silver Peak lithium mine. This is the nation's only currently operating major lithium mine, despite the fact that the US is one of the largest EV markets and home to the world's largest EV manufacturer. China, also a major EV market home to major EV manufacturers, has made significant headway in building up its domestic lithium production capacity, and the country's companies also have significant presences at the world's other major lithium production sites. This has come to concern those in charge in the US. Therefore, sights are set on Thacker Pass, home to the US's largest lithium deposit. The site could single-handedly propel the US into the ranks of major lithium producers, But getting a mine up and running there has proved difficult. The way in which major lithium deposits are distributed across the world is rather cruel. Overwhelmingly, they're located in arid regions with little water availability, like Nevada. Thacker Pass receives less than 10 inches or 25 centimeters of rain a year. However, the extraction and processing of lithium requires enormous quantities of water. It's expected that operations at the proposed Thacker Pass lithium mine would require 3,224 gallons or 12,204 liters of water per minute, roughly equivalent to the contents of a backyard above-ground pool. That water would be used to pump into the ground as part of the extraction process, during refinement, and to conduct necessary dust control at the site. To get this water, the mine would have to pump it out of the ground using wells, but every acre-foot of water in the area is strictly allocated, given the degree of scarcity. So the mine has to buy up water rights from others in order to gain the legal right to use it. What that means, however, is that there's a direct trade-off between one use and another, and in this case, the other use is predominantly ranching and farming, two key tenets to the local economy. In addition, there's a chance the project could do far more to further the inaccessibility of water in northern Nevada. The U.S. Bureau of Land Management's environmental impact study for the project found that it presented the distinct possibility of leaking unacceptable levels of arsenic into the area's groundwater table, which could take the entire region's water supply offline for hundreds of years. In an area where the availability of water undergirds almost all economic activity, that has people seriously concerned. The issues only compound on top of that. As Thacker Pass is, of course, a mountain pass, it acts as a wildlife corridor between the Double H and Montana mountains, two biodiversity hotspots. Therefore, the environmental impact study found the project likely to destroy or deteriorate thousands of acres of habitat used by the pronghorn antelope, sage grouse, golden eagle, and other unique species. For interrelated reasons, the project also has a number of local indigenous tribes concerned, the most vocal of which is the Fort McDermott Paiute and Shoshone tribe. They say that during the era of American soldiers rounding up and shipping indigenous people off to reservations, two of the tribe's families hid out in the shelter Thacker Pass provided, so they directly attribute the continued existence of their tribe to the area. In addition, they consider the pass a sacred site, in part because of a historic massacre they say occurred there. This assertion, however, was directly challenged in a court case related to the mine project, and the judge rejected the claim, citing a lack of evidence. To add to their opposition, the tribe put forward evidence linking the development of similar resource extraction projects, which are predominantly staffed by men, to increases in the rape and murder of indigenous women in nearby areas. Even just looking at these few headline issues, it becomes clear that the Thacker Pass lithium mine project is mired in a nearly insurmountable web of controversy and conflict, and it's hardly alone in that status. Much of the evidence opponents to the Thacker Pass mine have put forward is based on real-world experiences in the Lithium Triangle, the nexus between Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia that hosts some of the world's most productive lithium production facilities. An area in a similar situation, a remote arid landscape punctuated by small communities home to a historically oppressed indigenous population, the Lithium Triangle has seen an economic boon, but it's come at the cost of environmental and cultural devastation. Just as the issues are not confined to one geography, they're not even confined to lithium alone. Some 70% of the world's cobalt, a crucial component to current battery tech, comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the 8th poorest country in the world, according to World Bank figures. While a majority of the cobalt mining is conducted by large mining companies with often shaky safety and human rights records, a concerningly large minority is accomplished through what's referred to as artisanal mining, a term defining the illegal, informal practice of individuals mining cobalt by themselves and selling it on to shady middlemen. The complete lack of safety standards or regulations in the sector means child labor and deadly mine collapses are rampant. For those that aren't directly injured or killed on the job, long-term exposure to cobalt mines has been linked to significant health effects later in life and fatal birth defects for children in the region. Altogether, there's almost no such thing as ethical cobalt. There's also almost no such thing as green lithium. There's little appetite anywhere to increasing lithium mining in the places where it's accessible, and little progress has been made in the DRC in making cobalt mining less socially disastrous. As demand for EVs and their batteries increases, getting more cobalt and lithium will be incredibly difficult. However, on top of that, getting more cobalt and lithium that's more ethical and green, or even as ethical and green, will be next to impossible. But to decarbonize driving, solutions must be found. One option, rather than finding more raw materials, is to need less of them. Of course, the way to do that is by making batteries better. The most promising short-term innovation that could fulfill that mission is solid-state batteries. Whereas traditional EV batteries have a liquidy, viscous lithium-based electrolyte, solid-state batteries rather use a solid metal composition as their ion transport mechanism. This switch has a number of benefits, including a higher safety profile that reduces the risk of fire and therefore reduces the need for expensive safety features. Solid-state batteries can also be made without cobalt or nickel, which eliminates two problematic and costly necessities in current battery tech. Most significant, however, is solid-state batteries' higher energy density. Traditional lithium-ion compositions used in EV battery packs store about 114 watt-hours of energy per pound, or 250 per kilogram. That means 1 pound of battery could move a Tesla Model 3, for example, 0.4 miles, or 1 kilogram, 1.3 kilometers. Meanwhile, it's expected that solid-state batteries will be able to store between 175 and 225 watt-hours per pound, or 400 to 500 per kilogram, essentially doubling battery density. That means Tesla could halve the weight of their half-ton battery pack and not only keep range the same, but increase it, as the car would no longer need to carry the rest of the weight of the battery pack. On top of all those benefits, experts believe that, at scale, production costs of solid-state batteries could be even less than the current cheapest lithium-ion batteries. However, the issue is getting to that scale. Battery production needs to occur at absolutely massive quantities to reach cost competitiveness, an assertion backed up by the industry's current effective triopoly. The process of working down this cost curve is long, as there are few applications where battery weight matters as much as with EVs, and EVs won't switch to solid-state batteries until their cost is competitive, but their cost will only become competitive when the industry reaches a production capacity that only EVs can provide. So the industry has to wait for some level of scale to occur through niche solid-state battery applications in medical devices, race cars, and fighter jets, then wait for consumer electronics to realize the weight savings or battery life benefits the innovation could provide, then wait for the highest-end EVs to incorporate the technology in order to offer super long ranges as a luxury, before solid-state batteries can finally reach a cost that would allow them to permeate into what will be by then the large segment of everyday EVs. Most estimates place that enticing end goal more than a decade away. Even if the solid-state battery transition reaches fruition earlier, the world will still need a whole lot more lithium. Far from the potential environmental disaster at Thacker Pass is an existing environmental disaster, the Salton Sea. A century ago, Colorado River floodwaters breached through an irrigation canal and accumulated, over years, in the Imperial Valley's geographic low point, 236 feet or 72 meters below sea level. That massive puddle still exists today, but some of the water has slowly evaporated through time, leaving an even saltier, dirtier accumulation of water. Thousands more feet below, however, are a number of underground volcanoes that superheat water to hundreds of degrees. If one brings that water to the surface, the pressure change leads to it transforming into steam, and steam, of course, is what most power plants use to drive turbines. Traditional power plants use coal or natural gas to heat water up into steam, but this steam is created by the Earth, meaning it's carbon-free. That's why Berkshire Hathaway Energy has built 10 geothermal energy plants in the area, but crucially, this superheated water is filled with something else: lithium. Therefore, these geothermal plants are planning on adding an extra step in their process to extract lithium from the briny steam they use. Now, there are certainly significant technological hurdles that stand between now and a future of commercially competitive lithium production at the Salton Sea, especially as the metal only represents a tiny portion of the slurry of materials found in the water, but the lithium is there. Berkshire Hathaway Energy, as the largest existing energy company working around the Salton Sea, is leading the charge thanks in part to a sizable federal grant, and expects to have its demonstration facility up and running later in 2022. A number of other competitors have already started developing their lithium extraction plays around the Salton Sea, meaning America's first lithium boomtown might already be a foregone conclusion.
Have you ever heard of unobtainium? It's the magical energy mineral found on the planet Pandora in the movie Avatar. It's a fantasy in a science fiction script. But environmentalists think they found it here on Earth in the form of wind and solar power. They think all the energy we need can be supplied by building enough wind and solar farms and enough batteries. The simple truth is that we can't, nor should we want to, not if our goal is to be good stewards of the planet. To understand why, consider some simple physics realities that aren't being talked about. All sources of energy have limits that can't be exceeded. The maximum rate at which the sun's photons can be converted to electrons is about 33%. Our best solar technology is at 26% efficiency. For wind, the maximum capture is 60%. Our best machines are at 45%. So we're pretty close to wind and solar limits. Despite PR claims about big gains coming, there just aren't any possible. And wind and solar only work when the wind blows and the sun shines, but we need energy all the time. The solution, we're told, is to use batteries. Again, physics and chemistry make this very hard to do. Consider the world's biggest battery factory, the one Tesla built in Nevada. It would take 500 years for that factory to make enough batteries to store just 1 day's worth of America's electricity needs. This helps explain why wind and solar currently still supply less than 3% of the world's energy, after 20 years and billions of dollars in subsidies. Putting aside the economics, if your motive is to protect the environment, you might want to rethink wind, solar, and batteries because, like all machines, they're built from non-renewable materials. Consider some sobering numbers. A single electric car battery weighs about half a ton. Fabricating one requires digging up, moving, and processing more than 250 tons of earth somewhere on the planet. Building a single 100-megawatt wind farm can power 75,000 homes requires some 30,000 tons of iron ore and 50,000 tons of concrete, as well as 900 tons of non-recyclable plastics for the huge blades. To get the same power from solar, the amount of cement, steel, and glass needed is 150% greater. Then there's the other minerals needed, including elements known as rare earth metals. With current plans, the world will need an incredible 200 to 2,000% increase in mining for elements such as cobalt, lithium, and dysprosium, to name just a few. Where is all this stuff going to come from? Massive new mining operations, almost none of it in America, some imported from places hostile to America, and some places we all want to protect. Australia's Institute for Sustainable Futures cautions that a global gold rush for energy materials will take miners into remote wilderness areas that have maintained high biodiversity because they haven't yet been disturbed. And who's doing the mining? Well, let's just say that they're not all going to be union workers with union protections. Amnesty International paints a disturbing picture. The marketing of state-of-the-art technologies are a stark contrast to the children carrying bags of rocks. And then the mining itself requires massive amounts of conventional energy, as do the energy-intensive industrial processes needed to refine the materials and then build the wind, solar, battery hardware. Then there's the waste. Wind turbines, solar panels, and batteries have a relatively short life, about 20 years. Conventional energy machines like gas turbines last twice as long. With current plans, the International Renewable Energy Agency calculates that by 2050, the disposal of worn-out solar panels will constitute over double the tonnage of all of today's global plastic waste. Worn-out wind turbines and batteries will add millions of tons more waste. It'll be a whole new environmental challenge. Before we launch history's biggest increase in mining, dig up millions of acres in pristine areas, encourage childhood labor, and create epic waste problems, we might want to reconsider our almost inexhaustible supply of hydrocarbons, the fuels that make our marvelous modern world possible. And technology is making it easier to acquire and cleaner to use them every day. The following comparisons are typical and instructive. It costs about the same to drill one oil well as it does to build one giant wind turbine. And while that turbine generates the energy equivalent of about 1 barrel of oil per hour, the oil rig produces 10 barrels per hour. It costs less than 50 cents to store a barrel of oil or its equivalent in natural gas, but you need $200 worth of batteries to hold the energy contained in one oil barrel. Next time someone tells you that wind, solar, and batteries are the magical solution for all our energy needs, ask them if they have an idea of the cost to the environment. Unobtainium works fine in the movies, but we don't live in the movies. We live in the real world. I'm Mark Mills, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Prager University.
These are the kind of solutions needed as the world transitions to electric mobility. Electric vehicles, due to their reliance on batteries, are just dirtier than internal combustion vehicles to produce. That being said, the vast majority of emissions from cars, including from EVs themselves, come not from the production of vehicles, but from driving them. The science on the issue is sound. Electric vehicles, from production to use to scrapping, are responsible for about 75% less emissions than their internal combustion counterparts, even on current fossil fuel-based electric grids. Anyone who argues the opposite is either misinformed or attempting to disinform, and that gap will only widen as grids continue to decarbonize. However, there can be better alternatives to better alternatives. In the coming lithium gold rush, corners can and likely will be cut. The question the world will have to grapple with is whether it's worth destroying pristine environments like Thacker Pass in the name of environmentalism. Whether slowing the issue on a global level is worth accelerating it on a local level. Then, when the answer inevitably gravitates towards yes, the world will have to grapple with who must confront that local devastation. If the answer continues to be to place the burden on the world's most vulnerable, then even if the steady march of climate change is curbed, will the world have truly succeeded in stopping its effects? Is it worth sending teenagers to die in a war to prevent the propagation of terrorist organizations? Is it worth depressing an economy to slow the spread of a pandemic? Is it worth allowing individuals to own guns for self-protection, even if it allows easier access for bad actors? Determining what is an acceptable sacrifice has historically led to some of the most contentious, perennial political issues in history. Here, it's happening again. The public needs to decide, with the fate of the world on top of them, how much bad should be allowed for the greater good.